might have a little shorter episode. We'll see. So, but I do appreciate y'all being here and joining me on this beautiful rainy evening. So I want to read a quote and I want to get your reaction to it, your thoughts on it, and see if we might have a discussion based on this quote. It's probably my favorite quote by this person. A man who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. Muhammad Ali. I'll read it again. A man who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. And when I read that, I spent some time thinking about the difference between how I view the world now and how I viewed it at 20. And I often think back about my 20-year-old self with a lot of love and fondness and appreciation. He was very earnest and sincere and was a true believer, had a good heart, I think, and was trying to do some good. He's actually, I think, trying to change the world. But that world that he was attempting to change, I'm no longer attempting to change the world. But also, I do see that world very differently than I did. In the same instance, I am at my core that same person. And I've shared with y'all that my concept of growth, of maturation, of change is just becoming more of who we really are. That if we chip away, clear away the layers of indoctrination, of training, of programming, of culture and parents and religion and worldviews, that we can get back to who we really are. And yet, in the same way, Jesus didn't say to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be a child. But he said that we as grown-ups have to have a childlike quality, childlikeness. And to me, that's what this means. That's what for me, this is getting back to who I really am at my core. And yet, with all my experiences and all I've learned and witnessed, I bring that as well. And it does change the way I view the world. I feel like from my 20s to my 50s, I have wasted a lot of time. But I haven't done what he said, which is I haven't wasted all 30 years because I see the world exactly the same way I did 30 years ago. Do you agree with his quote? What does it make you think? How does it make you feel? A person who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life.
I think it makes sense, but I think a lot of people do tend to waste a lot of years of their life. I see so many people who are so rigid and inflexible and just so tied to their beliefs on politics or religion or even families sometimes, just that will take whatever comes at them and not ever give it any critical thinking. They get stuck in that. And to be honest, I was that way until I was, I transitioned at 47 and I was pretty much stuck in that. I mean, I took what I learned from my parents as a child and got from what I watched on television nonstop and didn't change much. And when I actually transitioned and started to actually open my mind and realize that, the world wasn't like I thought it was. Like, it's just been a tremendous amount of growth for the last 5 years. But I bet you I went 20 or 30 years without really changing much and without even maturing much. My job got fancier and my toys got fancier, but I was still a man child. And even in the last 5 years, I've done a lot of growth of that. So, yes, I think that's true. But I think a lot of people don't really grow after a certain point.
I saw this flipping through Facebook a little while back, and then I made it my, page or face picture or whatever you want to call it. And it's got a picture of these two children, and it says, "He who is different from me does not impoverish me; he enriches me."
Yes.
And I think being open to learning about other people's, whether those are your neighbors, people of different ethnicities, people of different genders or sexual orientations, people from different countries and different cultures, people with different languages, and what completely changed my world and opened my mind in ways I couldn't have imagined was going to live in a foreign country for a year and learning to speak a different language and kind of live in that, and then learning to be part of a different family that had different rules unspoken, a different homeostasis, different roles. um, that didn't make me any less. That just like expanded me. Um, and as I say this, I'm thinking a little bit about how in many places, and we know in the state of Florida, it's happening. I think probably throughout the U.S. is kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a bad word or something that's we shouldn't do, and it's essentially we shouldn't honor or look towards or get curious about differences. Instead, we should just stay here and stay small.
Yeah.
You know. Uh, I guess the other thing that comes to my mind about this is, I had this incredible experience, 18 years old, and then 3 years later, I had another very intense experience that was traumatic, that really crumbled me, right? That shook me, that led me to begin questioning and thinking about and looking at myself in the world and other people and my behaviors, that led me to begin looking at things in a completely different way as well. And so we have these different experiences. Sometimes, they're the big experiences, like these are two foundational growth experiences for me. These two things are probably there's everything I experienced from my family of origin, and of course we know that's the baseline. But these two specific experiences really created the lens and the framework through which I then have engaged for the most part in the world. And of course, it's grown, and I've been able to be open and receptive to other things. Um, but I guess related to the quote, if at 20 I decide, okay, I'm not going to allow myself to experience anything else different, and I'm going to stay here. Um, I don't know if it's wasted. It's just smaller.
Yes, it is.
That's a big thing. That's a big thing that's come up a bunch for me lately in the class Monday and just talking with friends and stuff is that we judge other people's existence by what we know of our own and expect them to be like us and can't understand how they can't be like us and it happens a lot. But if you can actually start to look at other people's existence and see what there's pros and cons and everything. And sometimes, the person that's the poorest is the happiest because they have community, they have family, and they're cooking together and hanging out together and stuff. And you're like, well, we went out to eat last night. We're obviously better than those people, but you know, it's a whole different world. And sometimes the people that don't have everything you think somebody should have, or you feel sorry for them because they don't, have a much richer world. And you never can learn to appreciate that because you're so stuck in trying to judge everything by what you know and fit everything into your box.
Jasmine, what have you been trying to fit in your box?
Um,
Uh,
I was just reflecting as you guys were talking. I was thinking, okay, at 20, how did I see the world versus how I do now, as I'm almost 50, um, and I wonder how much of my perspective has been not so much a different view of the world, so much as a different view of my place in it. Because particularly, as a younger person, um, strongly influenced, strongly impacted by the death of my father, strongly impacted by growing up other, and experiencing various forms of prejudice um, and some isolation, those sort of things. And then at 20 was when I was first pregnant and not yet married. And that had a huge impact on um, my sort of substitute family, which was the church. 'Cause we grew up over almost 2,000 miles away from where my parents grew up and where both sides, the majority of our families were. So spent a lot of time in church activities and with church, other church members, and really regarded a lot of the adults in the church as, additional parents and things. And in some senses, it was freeing because I had that act of sin or what have you to blame some of the derision and some of the negativity on and that sort of thing, and definitely I think definitely, like, especially now, I have much more positive regard for myself than I think I internalize so much of that negativity from a young age. That, I mean, even now, like, as Michael and I've had different discussions, I've shared with him, particularly over the last year, how often I find myself when I realize what my internal self talk is. It's terrible. I would never speak. I don't know that there's another human I would speak to the way that I talk to myself and the way I think, and that's after working on it and changing. So definitely, if you have such a negative view of oneself, I think some of the best aspects of the world are tainted by that, if that makes sense. And so the more that I heal, and the more I have feelings of worthiness, and so I feel like I pretty much had a strong sense of purpose. Definitely set out to help other people, but I think now it comes from less of a need, more being driven by that's my skill set and that's where my heart and my passions are, and there's less of an underlying feeling of just nothing being good enough that I did. If that makes sense. So I'm trying to see in the midst of all that, like, has my view of the world changed a great deal? And if not, have I been treading water and wasting time, or that sort of thing?
And hey, maybe Ali's wrong. I'm not, not saying you can disagree with what
Oh yeah.
he's saying. When I think about me, my personality, my way of being in the world, from a very early age, I was a seeker, searching, looking. And as I did that, I would find, but I also would be given, shown, right? And I've often thought, man, if I had, if some of the stuff I found later in life, if I'd just found sooner, and if I had, as a young person, asked different people my questions, if I had shared my seeking with a different group, or for me, this so often it was the book I picked up. Well, certain books, I wish I'd have picked them up a lot sooner. Now, you could say, well, you wouldn't have been ready for them, and maybe that's the case. Maybe it really is true that when the student is ready, the teacher will come. But I just wonder on this wasted time thing, if I had been exposed to certain things sooner, how different I would be, or my life would have been. I do think my 20-year-old self did a whole lot of projecting onto the world. I was far more naive than I realized at the time. I was far more innocent. I saw the world through some pretty rose colored glasses. I thought the goodness and integrity and just love of my family, of my folks, and of our circle, our little community, was just how the world was. And the other thing I'll say related to this whole discussion of what we're talking about is it's really not as much what we come in contact with or exposed to that changes our perceptions, our way of being or seeing the world, as much as it is the paradigms that we're stuck in, because they are how we interpret the things we encounter. So, two people can see the exact same thing, read the exact same quote, see or experience the exact same fact or truth, and interpret it radically different ways because of the lenses, because of the paradigm. And it took me a while to get to the place where I realized that it wasn't just new info I needed. It wasn't just new experiences or new books or new teachings but it was a new me. It was a new filter. It was a perception that I needed to address before I could even really allow in what was there for me.
That's been my biggest thing over the last couple of years. As I looked at, my younger years is pretty idyllic, other than the depression and stuff like that. But I had things that happened where, as a child, I was left alone sometimes, or in high school got bullied, or had some setbacks that kind of you know made me lose some confidence in myself and stuff. And I didn't realize how much those underlying things, and getting involved with Bob and the parts therapy helped me deal with that. And I realized, and I have a partner now that has been just a mirror for a lot of this stuff, that helps me see some of these things and see how I react to some of these things. And being open to seeing that and being willing to change that has been a difference. And I look back even over the last few years where these things would get triggered and it would set me into this dark place for a short period of time, or even weeks at a time in some cases last year. And it was stuff about not, you know, feeling like I was enough, or I'm never good enough, or no matter what I do matters. And I'm very logical in my life now. I'm very widely accepted. I'm very, involved in everything. So it didn't make sense. And I just try to bury that down. But, she started, and she's the reason I ended up going to bottom four therapy, because she's like, you have these feelings, you need to address them. I'm like, but they don't make sense. This is from childhood. So I think that's one of the things that's helped me is being open to viewing those and realizing that is a part of me and it sometimes takes over. And then once you realize that, learning what triggers it and not letting it, not getting defensive with it. Like I can better see my flaws now, where I used to just would minimize them and blame it on somebody else and stuff. So that's helped me too with other people, because it's easy to see other people's flaws and it's either easier to blame other people. But if you realize you have a part in that somehow, if you're in any kind of interpersonal relationship, you have some part in their reaction to something. So looking at where you are triggered by them or trigger them has helped me like uncover deeper things and learn more about myself, especially over the last like 6 months. And it's been a really great way to grow, losing that defensiveness and actually being willing to look at things and change.
It's interesting you say defensiveness, because I was one of the things I had written down was openness enables us to grow, to perceive, to even entertain the possibility that we, others, the world can be different than we perceive them, than we think they are, than we think we are. And defensiveness, guardedness keeps us from doing that. And there's so many things that we hold precious and sacred that we defend, and we won't consider looking at what it really is or means. And we create an idol out of so much, including our worldview. And in that posture of defensiveness, I don't think we can do the changing that Ali is talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
This was thinking this. I really wonder if what Ollie was speaking to was the maturing and the growing and the developing that you do, especially in being an athlete. Um, you don't just train a certain extent and then you're done. It's a continual process. And I think it's the same with our intellect, with our emotional well being, and with that type of growth. So I wonder if that is some of because as you grow and mature, then um, I feel like you see the world through different from a different perspectives.
I do
Or you
think,
see how to interact. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, I felt like I was interrupting you. Sorry. I just wanted to say that I do think that many of us at certain points in our development do think all I have to do is reach this point and then I'm done, right? I've grown enough.
Right, right,
That are we things we're struggling with. We think I'll figure them out, right? I'll conquer them. And growth, development, becoming our best selves is such a process, and it's never ending. And so there's another layer, there's another opportunity, there's another, and I think that mentality of I just have to get here, I just have to attain this, once I figure this out, once I get here. And so many people, I think, tell themselves, I'll be happy, I'll be fulfilled, I'll be whatever when I reach this place, and there is no such place.
There's the saying or quote is something along the lines of when I was a teenager, I thought my dad or I thought my parent was just so clueless and ignorant. And, in my 30s, I thought, boy, they really learned a lot or they've grown a lot. But basically the perspective, of the adolescent of the generation before them. And then when you get closer to the age of that generation and how you perceive them, how you perceive you. And the other thing I've been thinking as I've been listening is that, the more you know, the more you know that you don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
And but that involves looking, right? If you think you know everything, it's right here,
Yeah.
right here. And it's maybe safe or whatever.
We can.
I was kind of trying to reconcile the parts of me, and I think we all have parts that kind of yearn for the good old days, whatever those were, whenever those were. Most of us have some of that. And then we have, I don't want to call it cultures or belief systems that are all about, we just want the good old days. We want America back, whatever. We just want the good old days. And so, where is there value and soul and connection and relationship and life in good old days, things that we carry and want then to try to recreate or reconnect to or bring to our kids or bring into our life, or mourn that we don't have? And where is it that we are trying to grasp for some kind of control that we used to feel like we had?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's so wrapped up in nostalgia, and we were younger, and they say that mostly the music we love, we think we had the best music, right? When we were young, we thought our music was the best, and if everybody thinks that, it can't be true of everybody. When you were saying what you were, I had the thought, we can enter religion or philosophy or other disciplines, but those in particular, I think, to ask the questions or to get the answers. And if we think there's answers and we think we've got them, then we stop asking the questions. And so we don't live the mystery. We're not humbled by it. We feel like we've solved it. And that's, to me, one is a closed approach. One is the, I think you were saying, I often think about if there's a tiny keyhole that I perceive everything through, I can see everything. That's it. That is everything to me. But that's a fraction of what really exists. And so the less I know, the more I really think I know. The more I grow, the more I see I don't know shit about shit. We're recording this on Juneteenth. There was a truth, a fact that certain people were not told about. Does not make it less true. Doesn't mean it was not the case and didn't happen, but they were not told. What happened when they were told? A light came on, right? A freedom, a new world opened up. And I feel like that is what happens when we are open and when we are seeking and when we are growing and when we have the humility to say, my perception of the world is just that. It's just one perception. It is inaccurate. And even the things that I know a little bit about, first of all, it's very little. But second of all, that knowledge is so incomplete. I have 2 degrees in theology. First of all, what a ridiculous thing to get a degree in. I'm going to get a degree in God, literally in God talk. Talking about the most unfathomable thing there is, I know enough to know I know very little about the thing that I'm supposed to know the most about.
I'll tell you what, we're talking about nostalgia. And I remember when I first moved out of Panama City and went to Atlanta, like Panama City Beach was pretty much homogeneously white. There were the black people that came into town and worked there. The gays weren't around, but it was pretty much homogeneously white. And when I went away to school and I met a group of gay people and I met, you know, foreign students and stuff, like it really opened my world. But I still had a very limited view and it was very, white centric just because that's what I knew. That's what everything is. And we're talking about nostalgia and it kind of gets weaponized now
Yeah.
to those were the good old days. But the good old days they're talking about when they talk about there was family values and there was simplicity and there was this were great for some people, but it was because women kept quiet and stayed in the house and didn't cause problems. And black people were marginalized and separated into their own separate group. And gays were all in the closet, not allowed to be who they are. And even other immigrants, the Irish were separate, the Chinese are separate, the Koreans were all separated. Like it was great maybe for the central of America that was mostly white, but for so many things about that nostalgic past that so many of us look at was not a great time for them. And I don't think we realize that. And I didn't realize that really until I transitioned and started going to women's groups and going to groups with, other trans people. And I realized I used to fight against privilege. And that's been one of my greatest growing things is I was a I was a white male, I had a BMW and a big house and wife and two kids and a middle level management job at a Fortune 500. It looked amazing, but I was ready to kill myself. So I'd hear them talking about, oh, we're going to give breaks to women, or we're going to give breaks to minorities, or we're going to give breaks to the gay people. And I was like, well, what about me? I'm here dying too. And like coming out and being in these groups with these people, so I realized that privilege is not about something special you have, but it's about the roadblocks you don't have growing up. And learning that has opened me up so much and helped me grow so much. And I'm giving a talk on Sunday, and that's what we talk about shutting down representation for all these different groups. When you start to include everybody and look at everybody's backgrounds and everybody's thoughts on things and realize there is no truth, there's just perception. And on one different situation, there might be 50 different perceptions on it. But we make our truth everybody's truth, and that's where it gets limiting and it kind of stifles growth. Or when you open up to everybody, it builds this beautiful tapestry of just love and acceptance and a broader world.
The good old days were the very, very, very bad old days for certain people.
Oh yeah. And another thing, I think it was something Bob was saying. I don't remember exactly, but I remember in the past when I was so depressed and I was so in my hole that I just accepted myself for who I was, even though I hated myself. Like I just came to the realization that I could not do any better. My mind was playing against me. So I just accepted that I was an asshole. Was I? No, not really. I was just angry and I came across that way because the anger was coming out. But I just eventually accepted that. I think a lot of us get stuck in that where we like to do better and we try to do better. And it could be anything. It could be just your attitude or it could be stopping drinking or whatever. And, like so many people now just go, I'm an alcoholic. So what? I'm an asshole. So what? Because they can't do any better. And that gets you stuck too. And that's a sad thing. And I look at transition as a gift because it broke me out of that and it made me look at the world different. And it freed me from that growth because I was, like Ali said, I had just gone 30 years and wasted it. And getting out of that acceptance of I can't do any better really has changed and helped me actually make the most out of the last few years.
If the quote is true, if he's right, then the most important thing we can do is make sure that moving forward, we change, we transform, we are open, and really, to me, for me at least, it begins with questioning. I I try to question everything, and if I'm not open to saying, is this right? Is this true? This thing that I think is this is the way the world works, or this is the way this person is, or this is the way I am. Is that true? Is that accurate? If I'm scared to ask that about something, then that lets me know that's the very thing that needs inquiry and needs my attention.
One of the favorite quotes I've heard lately is the truth can stand up to any amount of inquiry.
Yeah.
So, if you're in a religion's a big thing because I study religion a lot, that if they tell you not to question something, there's something that's not true there because it can't stand up to inquiry. Where I say, look at everything, ask as many questions as you can, and that's how you actually find the truth because it's unchanging no matter how many questions you ask or how many different ways you come at it.
Listening to you, I was remembering City Slickers. You guys remember the City Slickers movie with
Yes.
um, oh
Jack Palance,
Billy?
Billy Crystal.
Yeah, and um, more or less, there's that point in the movie, and I think Jack is the Palance character is essentially imparting wisdom
Yeah,
to to Billy, and it's really what is your one thing? What is your one thing? And kind of the idea that when you engage and embrace and you do your one thing, then there, I don't know if I can't think of the right words, but when you're really connected to the one thing or one of the one things, it just like broadens you and you go deeper and you feel more authentic, and it's not necessarily about having to know the other 520 million things, but the better you connect with your one thing, the more you actually do
yeah,
understand or have some sense of connection with the other things and other people who are connected to their one thing.
absolutely. Doesn't he tells him the one thing, but he dies before he can tell him what it is, right?
Yeah,
And so he's trying to figure out
yeah,
what, and I guess in this, and then he does in the
right.
movie. But yeah, that makes you sharing that makes me think of something that is counterintuitive in the work that I do, which is you would think to be a bestseller or to reach a wide audience, you need to write in generalities. You need to keep it, really broad. When in fact, it's the more specific, the more unique, the more that a reader will connect with because it speaks to what is unique and specific about them, and maybe something different but the universal is found in the specific. And you get one good concrete detail and you can know so much about a character. Whereas if you try to keep it general, then there's just
Yeah.
nothing. It just flows away.
And I saw something this morning that was talking about they figured out how to measure different emotions, and I don't know how they get people to have these emotions, but they were able to measure anxiety and anger and grief and love and whatever. And they said, what would you think's the highest vibration of all the different feelings? And she was like, most people would say love. That's got to be the highest. But they said, and it was either like 4,000 or 7,000 times higher than love was authenticity. And I think that's what you talk about when you get to specificity of those characters, is you're actually allowing people to connect and see authentically who that person is. And there's no pretense. There's no wavering on, maybe they're this, maybe they're that. This is who that person is. And you can love them or hate them, but connect with them.
Yes.
And I think that authenticity is why I feel like my experience has been different than most people, is that I've developed so much security in who I am, and it's been as a result of the reactions of everybody else. Like having that fear base and thinking I was going to get ugly things said to me or whatever, and having everybody be so supportive, it's made me more comfortable with who I am, and that comfort, I think, has rolled into that authenticity. And now I just feel like I can go everywhere, and because I am open and whatever with other people, they're open with me, and it's just amazing.
If I pressed each of you and said, could you come up with one example that makes this quote true? One thing you thought, perceived, believed at 20 that you absolutely did not at 50. Could you think of something that was a big enough change in perception that you could note it, that it stands out?
Yes, politics. I grew up super conservative. My mom was okay that I transitioned and was a transgender person. She was mortified the day she found I voted for a Democrat. And I didn't want to. It was a change. And I went from super conservative to super liberal to now I'm kind of apolitical. I have had to analyze why I was conservative at that time, why I'm liberal now, and I can see both sides of it. And that's been the most refreshing change ever, because in a lot of these groups I lead, it's getting heated now. There's a big divide among people. And that's been my big thing, is to try to keep people from being so tied to these ideals. Because I remember when I was a conservative, I thought Bill Clinton was the end of the world and Obama was awful. And now you see all the liberals like Trump's the end of everything. And, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but there's something bigger than that. And we always think that it's that. So letting go of that has just really been a sense of freedom, and helping other people see this is kind of become something that I'm happy to actually do now, because I've been so polarized on both sides. A long time on the conservative side, a short time on the liberal side, and now just kind of being able to be in the middle has been really, really super transformational, and helps me not get so caught up and stuck where I was before.
Great. Excellent. If you don't have one, it's no big deal.
Mine would be something related to, you know, how people work, mental health, trauma, um, patterns, um, and things that I didn't have awareness or couldn't even conceive of at 20. Um, you know, begun learning about different people, different cultures. I learned a different language, but really getting inside, that's not something I knew much about. And I still, you know,
Trying to find a way to verbalize what I'm thinking as far as what shift that I made. Because I think well, the short way of putting it is things um, that I grew up or was trained to believe, mostly in line with faith and certain morals. I have um, a more mature, a more, I guess, open view and a less rigid view or dogmatic view of certain, like, what sin is and isn't, and um, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's too vague, but
No, no, anything's fine. Sometimes I wonder if anything I thought at 20 is bears any resemblance to the way I think now or what I perceive. Um, I do know the core self is still there, but at that age we have had such little experience, and we do think that the way we see things is reality, is real, and we do think we know a good bit. And I think in the same way that time changes as we age, because we've had so much more of it than we did when we were 5 or 10 or 20. Memories are, changing, and it has so much to do with perspective and experience. And I feel like the same is true of our thoughts, our perceptions as we grow. And so everything y'all have mentioned, I could agree. Yes, same for me. Mental health stuff, my perceptions of that, religious stuff, my perceptions of that, political stuff, my perceptions um, have completely changed. And I'm so glad they have, and I hope they will continue to. I don't want to stop growing. I don't want to stop being open to the other. And as Jennifer said, it is so easy to think we're right and the other is wrong. It's so easy to judge. And another thing Jennifer said about, we judge people based on what we would do, how we are, how we find the world. And that's so easy to do. And I've done that just my entire life, and so often. And I have certain standards, certain things that I think are the bare minimum, especially of, say, parents, of people with kids, but in all manners of things. And it's even the way in which I, as an introvert or whatever I am, the ways things that are authentic for me may be very different for someone else, but I'm judging them based on how it would feel if, or how it would be if I did that. Tonight at the gym, I asked one of the young guys that he's probably the person that, well, he is the guy who uh, is there as much as I am. Consistently, we're the ones asking everybody, "Hey, you want to play? Let's get a game up," you know. And I think he's 30 or about to be 30. And I asked him if he thought he'd still be playing when he was my age. And he was saying how much he hoped that he would be. And I said, "Do you think I'll still be playing when you're my age?" Um,
In
but
heaven.
what's that? In heaven? Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, probably won't even be here. He was kind enough to say, "Well, I'm sure you'll still be shooting, even if you can't move." But I want to hear what Ali is saying and take it for the challenge that it is, for the correction, for the encouragement, for this moment moving forward. That if I'm, at 50, when I get to 80, will I still be thinking, perceiving, believing what I did at 50? And it might just be that going from 20 to 50 is easier to make changes than it is from 50 to 80. I see examples all the time of people that in older age stop growing, and maybe they really did a lot of growing in younger age. But I would like to, I'm not talking about following fads. I'm not talking about, whatever the hottest, trendiest thing is in any, in religion or in philosophy or in the arts or in music, or I just mean expanding. I heard an artist say one time that for him, there were artists that he encountered that shut him down, and there are artists that opened him up. And he was, I believe, talking about there were certain artists that were so other and beyond and genius, and that he was like, I could never get there or do that. But there's others that what they're doing is inspirational. I do think I could do that. And I want to surround myself with people that are growing. All of you are, and I find you inspirational. I told Bob specifically just recently how much I appreciated he's referencing. I just, took this personality test, or this, I just read this book, or I so appreciate that. And you all do it, but I just am grateful for anyone who is open and growing, and that challenges me and that encourages me, and I do feel like that's one of the things we can do is order our lives towards growth, towards not being the same in 20 or 30 years, or maybe even in 20 or 30 days than we are right now.
I know growing up, and there's songs about it. You got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And, you know, if you don't believe in something, you believe in, all these different things that tell you you've got to formulate how you feel about something and stick with that and not waver and not waffle. And we criticize politicians when they change their mind on an issue and stuff like that. So we've kind of demonized growth in a while, where they want to indoctrinate you into one thing and keep you there without looking. And I think that's another big change that I've done recently is I'm always looking to change my mind. If somebody has a better argument about something, I'm not just going to take it and go with it, but I'm going to at least research it and consider it and be open to that change, because, you know, getting away from the church indoctrination I had actually helped, where I went away from the Bible pretty hard. I ended up coming back because there's a lot of truth in it. It just wasn't taught right. And I was taught not to question anything and not to do anything outside of this. But when I actually opened my mind up, coming back to that was amazing. And it's been a good thing. So opening your mind opening your mind and being willing to change will ultimately help you find what's true and what's real in this world, and not just the opinions of other people that we all live on for so much.
I'll close my part of this with this thought, and then I'd love for anybody else to say anything you would like to close us out. My race to run is uniquely my own. I start where no one else started. My journey, my path, my life is not in competition with anyone else. We don't, like I said, we don't start in the same place in any way. So growth is measured by me, by where I was. And so that's another aspect of this quote is I'm not comparing myself to who you were at 20 or who you were at 30, but who I was. Am I growing? Am I evolving? Am I becoming? And even if, let's say that the change is not all that stark, was I open enough to change that I'm living in that open way, that if there is correction, if there is adjustments, if there are tweaks that need to be made, I will make them because I'm open and I'm humble. I don't think I know everything or maybe anything. That's all. That's all. It's just what do I need to do, and how do I compare to 20-year-old me, not 20-year-old Ali. And there's ways in which you can say Ali changed the world. He did some huge things. That's his race. I'm not running his race. I don't get the opportunities he did because of the gifts he was born with. And even that earlier I was talking about something that would be authentic for me, wouldn't be for someone else. The things that Ali did, that would not be authentic for me. But in many ways, I think he did live a very authentic life. And I think he was trying to grow and change and is a good example of that. I'm just going to try to do that for me in my race.
What you said kind of made me realize too, there's a lot of people get stuck because of guilt and shame and regret too. They look back and they think about all the things they've missed or all the things they haven't done, and they kind of give up. And that's another thing I've had to do, like, especially around my kids. Like, I've got to give myself grace for I did the best I could back then with what I had, and realize it's never too late to be better and to learn and to grow. But so many people look back and they have so much regret in their life, they just give up and just go, I've blown the last 30 years. What's the point? when they don't realize they still got another 50 years ahead of them.
Mm. Any final thoughts from you two?
The song started going through my head, and I got it here. It's U2 1987. Any guesses?
Is that the Joshua Tree album?
I think it is. It's I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Na, 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 na,
Yeah.
na, na.
It's this song of journeying and yearning and discovering and seeking, and then it's still I haven't found what I'm looking for. But I'm looking at this, and I mean, it's a wonderful, amazing. But I've climbed. It starts with I've climbed highest mountains. I've run through the fields only to be with you, only to be with you. And then all the other things I've run, I've crawled, I've scaled these city walls only to be with you. And then I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And then, I've kissed honey lips, I've burned like fire, I've spoken the tongues of angels. Um, I've been as cold as stone, you know, and it goes on and on, and then it begins referring to Christ. At the end, a lot of it is referring to Christ. But then it still is, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But thinking about that sense of a you, a one, whether it's, for my childhood and the fantasy of finding the one and a teenager and that all that, and I still have some of that inside of me, right? But then other ones, that whether it's a religion or a faith, or what is the one, and do you ever really find it?
Right.
Do you ever really find it? um
That's related to your City Slickers.
yeah,
Yeah.
dude, the one.
Yeah.
You said song, that makes me think of along the same vein of that. I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climb. The live like you were dying.
Yeah.
Like, most people don't live until they've got a terminal diagnosis. That encouragement to actually live while you're actually alive is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think I may have shared this in one of our previous conversations, but I was driving to, I think, like Daytona or someplace for a conference, and as I was driving down, I was in my mind reviewing the keynote speech I was supposed to give and some of the finer points and things. And on the radio, there was a trivia contest, and it was there was like how many hours you spend like a third of your life doing this. I can't remember if it was like being on the toilet or something, sort of obscure. But in the conversation on the radio, they mentioned that the average lifespan, I think, has increased from 74 to perhaps 79. But so for some reason, I just felt compelled to do the math of how many days that was. And so in that speech, I talked about it's an organization about leadership and self-development, and so a lot about goal setting and how to look at, like, how to even know which goal to set, or especially as an organization, when you're in a community with a great deal of needs, how do you refine what your impact should be or can be? And so I was looking for something that had to do with goals as my point. And I remember thinking, if you, I think it comes out to, I'll have to do the math again, but like, let's say it comes out to like 100,000, right? Like if you think of $100,000, like within a minute, each of us could spend that right down, because there's things that we need or want, or, go towards goals, or even for our children or grandchildren. But if you think of your life in terms of a finite number of dollars or days, like how often do we we talk about SMART goals where it's, time oriented and things, but, being mindful of, I think there's um, some reference to a guy that talks about zero sum days. So there's not a day where you don't knock out something. You have some task, something, some way of being productive, some way of working towards your goal every day. And if you think of life that way, like Tim was referring, the live like you're dying, or kind of having that idea of making every moment count. But I think it also has to be balanced with enjoying those moments. And I think if there's a shift I've made, it's definitely being more present in the sense of enjoying those moments and not feeling like we had to fit everything in, and constantly looking for preventing negative things from happening, and planning ahead versus also just enjoying what's happening now.
Thank you.
And I wonder, what made me think of that is I wonder, if some of what Ali was referencing is Michael spoke of time is a little bit different in our minds at 50 than it was at 10 and 15 and 20. And I wonder if that isn't a part of it as well, as being more and more aware of your mortality, and being more grateful for the time that you've had and still have, and being more aware of your own presence and impact on what you can do as an individual, and a more, maybe more of a sense of self, or the one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank y'all for letting me spring this on you, and thanks for the great conversation, and so appreciate it, and feel like it's beneficial and worthwhile.
When you